Matthew Berry just released his ride or die player for this upcoming fantasy football season. He's had some hits or misses since he started this whole thing about 7 years ago, and I'm here to explain to you why his ultimate pick for this year is going to fall flat. Now, before we do a deep dive on the player he selected, we're going to look at the 4 other candidates that he seriously considered to be his ride or die player. And before we go any further in this video, I just want to say that I personally love Matthew Berry. He is like the godfather of fantasy football. I think he's a hilarious guy. I followed him from ESPN over to NBC. I follow him where I can. I just think he's a good guy. He's really funny. I really believe he's done more pure good for the entire scene of fantasy football than anyone else. And not only is he a great advocate for fantasy football, but he's extremely intelligent and he knows his stuff. Yes, he's a bit of an old head these days.
Get off my lawn.
But he's extremely young at heart. He's very funny still. And I find myself generally agreeing with most of what he says, which is why I had to pause when I saw who his ride or die player was going to be. Before we get to him, let's look at the 4 other candidates. So the first one that he had was Chase Brown, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals. Chase Brown to me is like a little worse version of De'Von Achane. And there's nothing wrong with being a little worse version of a player who is great. The good news for Chase Brown is he has a much better quarterback than De'Von Achane has ever had. He's surrounded by talented tight ends and wide receivers. The Bengals are always behind, so they're in throwing scripts, and they keep him on the field because he's great at being a pass catcher as well. I actually would have liked Chase Brown as a pick for his ride or die. I think there's a little bit more fluctuation, a little bit more uncertainty around him as opposed to the player that he picked. And I think Chase Brown is going to have a really good season. The next candidate that Matthew Berry had was Bears tight end Colston Loveland. If you guys have seen this guy's player profile pic on Sleeper or Fantasy Pros, he looks pretty ridiculous. I don't know. It looks like his eyebrows have been drawn on. It's very strange. Ben Johnson has touted that they're going to have the highest scoring offense of all time in NFL history on a points per game basis. Yeah, we'll see about that, buddy. You still have Caleb Williams as your quarterback, the least accurate quarterback in the NFL. Yes, he can do some amazing athletic things, but most of your really close wins came in single-digit games with fourth quarter heroics last season from the defense and Caleb Williams. I'm not so sure that sustains. Of all the candidates, I find Colston Loveland to be sort of an odd one, as he's currently going as tight end 3. Now, for those of you who don't know, Matthew Berry's ride or die, it's basically him saying, hey, I'm higher on ADP on this one player than everyone else is. And I'm basically guaranteeing, as close as he can in his mind, that he is going to outperform the ADP. And he usually does it by enough, usually 3, 4, 5 spots overall, which is respectable. I wouldn't call any of these players like bold prediction, like this guy's gonna go crazy. Like, for instance, I've got Jaden Daniels finishing outside the top 10 quarterbacks, and he's currently going at 5. Like, that would be a little bit more extreme of like a bold prediction, where his ride or die is like, hey, he's going to outperform his ADP by a few slots. Okay, I see why he didn't pick Colston Loveland in that case. I'm not sure he's going to have a better year than Trey McBride or Brock Bowers. I don't think he's talent-wise better than those 2 players, even though he looks really promising. I don't think he can really touch those 2, so I don't think there's a lot of room for him necessarily to make him his ride or die, unless he really believed he was better than those 2, which he clearly didn't. So Colston Loveland, I think he's going to be good. I think, it's a really deep year for tight end, so unless you're getting really McBride or Bowers, those are the top 2 to me. I've been waiting on Loveland in a lot of my drafts because I think you can get guys that maybe won't be quite as good as him, but the separation's not too different. You can get them 6, 7 rounds later. The next candidate that he had was Egghead Kenneth Walker III, now with the Kansas City Chiefs. I would have loved for this to be his ride or die. I would have given this an S grade. This would have been S tier ride or die, because everyone out there is like not that high on Kenneth Walker III, and they're all saying, oh, he was just all right in Seattle and they let him walk. Listen, I think Kenneth Walker III, when he's healthy, is easily one of the best running backs in the NFL. He really is like the back end of those elite running backs. He's like a step up above Breece Hall in my mind. He's a beast. And the Chiefs have not had a running game in years. And I think they've really made an emphasis to get back to that this season. He was Super Bowl MVP last year, and I feel like he has something to prove going to Kansas City. And I imagine he's gonna be playing with a chip on his shoulder after the Seahawks let him go. This player would have been a bold pick, especially because the fantasy community seems very divided on him. I would have been all in on that pick. I would have been rooting for it. So we're gonna see what happens with Kenneth Walker III. When he's been dropping to me, I have been snatching him at his ADP a ton this season. And the last candidate before we get to the winner is Ladd McConkey. This is another one. If he would have picked this guy, I would have been like, damn, Matthew Berry, you've got some big cojones on this one. And I think the reason he didn't pick Ladd McConkey is because he was just too sketched out by him. I was kind of down on Ladd McConkey. I think everyone's been down on him because he had such a poor season last year and what was such a strange LA Chargers offense with all the injuries and on the offensive line and Keenan Allen coming back for a year and just sort of a strange year. I've really come around on Ladd McConkey the last few weeks. I do think he's actually going to have a good season. I do think he's going to outperform his ADP. I think if Matthew Berry would have gone with this one, like my respect level would have been through the roof for him. I would have been a little more nervous, but here's the thing. I think Ladd McConkey has a route this year to get to around 1,200 receiving yards. He's currently projected at around 900. That's about a 30% increase from where he's at being projected. And I think he can get there. I think he could really slide into the Jalen Waddle role that was with the Dolphins when Mike McDaniels was coaching them. And now Mike McDaniels is in LA. And they've said that he can line up and he can play any wide receiver position. And I think McConkey is really going to surprise a lot of people this year. I have been taking him as a strong cornerstone floor play in a lot of my drafts because he's been dropping. All that being said, let's move on to Matthew Berry's ultimate winner and player that he's doing his ride or die with this season, and that is Devonta Smith. Devonte, however you want to say it, I don't know what he goes by. Devonta Smith is currently going as wide receiver 14, typically towards the end of round 3 and at the top of round 4. So many people are high on Devonta Smith this year, which is why I feel a little disappointed at where Matthew Berry ended up as far as deciding to pick him. He feels just like an overly unanimous pick by the fantasy community that like he's going to have this breakout season without AJ Brown there. And you know what? I don't necessarily buy that. There's a reason AJ Brown was commanding those targets over Devonta Smith, and I don't think AJ Brown is necessarily an elite guy. I always think he's been one tier below elite, and Devonta Smith has been at the bottom of that tier with AJ Brown. And in all that time with him there, he hasn't been able to eclipse Brown or grow in a ton of ways. I know I just mentioned Jalen Waddle and how I think Ladd McConkey is probably going to be like Jalen Waddle. Let's talk about Jalen Waddle again, because to me, Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle are virtually the exact same player, right? They're both really good at everything, but they're not necessarily great at anything. And I'm sure I'm going to get attacked for this. Like, oh, Devonta Smith's so much better than Jalen Waddle. Let me give you some numbers. Devonta Smith has played 80 games. Jalen Waddle, 78. Devonta Smith has had 385 receptions. Jalen Waddle has had 373. They both came from Alabama. They both do everything really well, but not necessarily anything truly elite or great. Receptions per game, 4.8 each. Identical. Receiving yards per game, 62.7 for Smith and 64.6 for Waddle. They both score a touchdown every third game on average, and they both average 13 yards per reception. You guys, they're literally the exact same player, but here's the crazy thing. Jalen Waddle is going to Denver this year, and he's kind of the 1B, and people are a little excited about him. Like, everyone just assumes Devonta Smith is just been this superstar that's going to get uncorked. I don't really think that. I think he's going to have a marginally better season than last year, but I don't think all of a sudden in his 6th year, he's going to make this leap into being like a NFL superstar. He's never had 100 receptions in a year. He averages around 900 receiving yards this season. Like, I'm just not sure what people are expecting. Let's say he gets 10% more target share, right? Let's say 15, 20% if we're being generous. Like, his ceiling is probably like 1,200 yards. He's never had more than 8 touchdowns in a season. He's not a massive red zone threat. And honestly, he's a little too nice. He's not very intimidating when you look at the dude. He looks like sort of like a skinny Slender Man type. There's a total difference when a cornerback is lining up one-on-one against him than guys like Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins. These dudes are like on another elite level. And Matthew Berry is basically saying, hey, I think Devonta Smith can push up 4 or 5 and into that second tier and have a breakout season. Everyone's betting on that. I just don't necessarily see it happen. I think it's a really safe pick because I don't think you can go wrong with Devonta Smith necessarily. He's going to get you at least 1,000 yards likely, but I just don't think his upside is much higher. I also feel like everyone is so hype on him that it's already baked into his ADP. It'd be different if he was kind of going the same place where he was the last few seasons, but he's already jumped up to where people are assuming. Like, the fantasy market is forward looking and assuming he's already going to get to that next level, which does not make him a value for me. So I've been fading him in a lot of my drafts unless I can get him at a lower value, which hasn't really been happening. Overall, I'm giving Matthew Berry's pick this year a B grade. I think it's okay. It feels a little safe. It feels a little majority fantasy consensus. And I would have liked to see him gone just a little bit bolder. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. We have a ton of videos on the channel. Please go check them out. They're going to help you win and succeed at your 2026 draft. We'll also be making videos throughout the entire 2026 season. And we'd love to have you along with us.